And I said to my wife, I said, there's no way I'm going to take this thing.
Like,
There's too many amazing people. I'm not a firm believer in reinventing the wheel. The whole mentality of physical activity versus physical education.
That's all we should expect right now. We can't do more than that. And I was like, oh boy, if we're the ones saying that, I don't get a good feeling about that. Stacy and I were actually going to write a book. We've got a title. We call it 6 Feet PE. It doesn't have any pages. We don't have a table of contents. We don't have an introduction. We don't have words in this book yet. It is completely blank, but we got a nice title.
One of the things that kind of go back to the whole Teacher of the Year thing, you don't get to these levels by yourself.
Welcome, physical educators. This is Thinking PE.
Because FIED is more than just fun and games.
I'm Stacy Nelson.
And I'm Jamie Seneca.
And it's our goal to dig deeper beyond the activities that make your class awesome.
So buckle up and join us on this journey. Welcome to another edition of Thinking PE. Jamie, you know what I'm thinking?
What's that?
I'm thinking toy. What does it take to be a toy?
Toy. Sure you don't mean tool? I mean, I don't like to talk about my high school experience, but I can tell you firsthand what it takes to be a tool.
I'm thinking Teacher of the Year toy.
Yeah, Teacher of the Year, you know?
Yeah, I'm thinking, what does it take? What you hear people are their Teacher of the Year. What journey did they have to go through? What does it take to be Teacher of the Year? I don't know.
Well, I say I'm glad that's on your mind, because we got a chance to get into the thinking mind of a National Teacher of the Year in Donn Tobin. And he was the 2019 Shape America Teacher of the Year. And the first thing that struck me is how humble he was, and just how easy he was to talk to as he took us through that journey. And it was an extensive journey, but just got into that of how he became the Teacher of the Year. And then we got a chance to just his experiences as a teacher.
Yeah. So I'm thinking we can just jump right into that recording, because but before I do want to mention that, reaffirm that piece about just what a humble guy he is. Because you'll hear in his talking what a great teacher he is, but he's not out there waving a big banner about the awards he's made or whatever. You can just tell he's all about the business of teaching and kids and that type of thing. And that's what I took from it. So I'm really excited to share this with the PE community.
Yeah, and that's one of the things he talks about the great people that are around him that have helped him on his journey. He talks about just being a teacher first. And I mean, like I say, it was just awesome to get that opportunity to talk to somebody that's gone down that's experienced that journey.
All right, well, let's get into it. Take a listen.
So hi guys, I'm Donn Tobin, and I teach K through 5 physical education at Lakeview Elementary School in Mahopac, New York, which is southeastern New York State. And I'm finishing up my 23rd year doing that. And I'm very honored that I was able to be awarded a teaching an award from Shape America.
Yeah. Can you expand on that a little bit? It was Teacher of the Year, correct?
Yeah. Elementary physical education Teacher of the Year.
Can you take us down that journey a little bit? Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of the honest answer is, hey, I don't know. But in all honesty, it really all starts at the state level. Mm-hmm. So, most of the time what I've been involved with and what I'm familiar with is if for a teacher that's gone above and beyond in their association and becomes very active in, professional development and in teaching methodology, you tend to be nominated. So I guess somebody nominated me from New York State, because I'm a member of New York State AVERD. And I was very involved in New York State, and I still am, on my regional level. It's called Southeastern Zone, which is the 4 counties that surrounding the area that I live in. On a state level, I present at lots of different conferences. And I guess you get your name out there going on committees and things like that. And so to get to the national, it really starts at that state. And I can tell you that in the state level, I had, to fill out essays or certain rubric that I was judged upon by my peers. I had to give recommendation letters and such. And I had won it. And being that I'm a Shape America member, I had the opportunity, if I really wanted to go on to the regional, which is the district level. And I'm a member of the Eastern District. And I honestly, I never thought I was going to win New York. And I wasn't originally going to go for the Eastern District. And somebody talked me into it. They said, listen, what can you lose? You lose, you lose. And I figured, okay, I'll give it a shot. And it's a whole other application process, very, very similar in a lot of ways to the state level, where you had to have your references and you had to, fill out, an essay, and a lot of it is reflecting back on your teaching. So it's not just submitting your resume and what you've done on committee work and things like that, but it's the nitpicky stuff, which in a lot of ways is amazing, because even if you don't win, it really helps you reflect on your own teaching and whether or not you're on point with what you want to accomplish with scope and sequence and all that.
For sure.
But having said that, I got lucky and I won the Eastern District, and you don't even have the option. At that point, they just push you forward to national. The national level is just like the final layer. So basically what they do is they take all your application stuff that you've won and submitted. They use that again. On top of that, I had to have a semi-unedited videotape lesson of my teaching. So it was a 20-minute lesson of my teaching where I was allowed 2 breaks, but you can't jazz it up with music or anything like that. You had to be on mic the entire time because they want to hear what you're saying when you're not on camera. And then there's a reflective essay based on what they saw, what they didn't see. They want to see your surroundings. They want to see how you interact with kids, how you give feedback, how you teach. On top of that, there was also a business interview. So I was on an online interview similar to this, very formal though, in a suit, with a committee of 3 people. And I had 12 questions that I needed to answer in 30 minutes. And if you spend too long on a question, oh, well, your time's up. That's it. The funny thing about that interview is I remember I finished with 1 second left. And I'm like, man,
time
talk
management
about
at its best.
time management. Yeah.
I'm just imagining you in like a suit and a tie, and then you've got like Hawaiian shorts on.
Well, the funny thing is I wore a full suit just in case they told me to stand up, because I don't know, hey Don, do you mind standing up for us? And if I had like lacrosse shorts on or something, they'd be pretty upset. And then the thing is, honestly, it's luck, because I have no idea what they were looking for. I don't know what their rubric looked like. I don't know what they were grading us on. And even more so than that is the people that I was up against. They are absolutely amazing people, all deserving of that national award. In fact, in my mind, they are National Teachers of the Year anyway.
Yeah.
So, it took me, even though like my year is up, it took me a full year to even kind of comprehend and believe that it happened.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it sounds not like luck. It sounds like you put a lot of work into it too.
It's a little both. It's a lot of work, but it's also luck, because again, I don't know what they're looking for. So
yeah,
it seems so awesome.
I mean, like you said, these guys are all teachers of the year in so many ways. Anybody that gets to that point where you're nominated by your peers, that's quite a high honor. And then, like you said, whatever they're looking for at that point, maybe that happened to be the day they were looking for the stuff that you put out. Yep. I
sat through a special awards thing where we got to hear everybody's bios, and I was blown away by the stuff that I call them my colleagues, that they were doing in their schools. Yeah. And I said to my wife, I said, there's no way I'm going to take this thing. There's too many amazing people.
Tell your wife, make sure you take seconds, because we're not going to be here tomorrow.
Cool.
Well, Jamie, I just say it's got to be, from our side of it sounds like just a humbling experience, but I mean, just I don't want to say a life changing, but you're just so humble about it, and I really respect that, and it's so encouraging as well.
It's surreal, because I don't think of myself like that. I just think of myself as somebody that's trying to get a little bit better and trying to help out, and that's it. You know,
Yeah.
I really don't have a hidden agenda at all. And so, like, I think of other people when they get to that level, not me. So it's a little weird, you know.
But that's the beauty in it, that they offer an award for people that aren't hungry for it. You know, you didn't get into PE teaching to, accomplish this goal. You got in it to teach kids, love on kids, do a good job, get better and better. And then they put this award out there just to recognize the people that are doing that. You know, kind of says that it says something for all the people that are out there doing exactly what you're doing, that might not go through that interview process that says, hey, I'm just doing what he's doing. You know, I don't get an award, but that's fine. I'm teacher of the year in my own. Ask my students, I'm teacher of the year, you know.
Yeah, right.
And I laugh, but that's true. You are to your students, and that's kind of what that represents, I guess, is what I was trying to say, is to each of our students, we are, hopefully you're a teacher of the year, you know, type of a deal. But congratulations anyways.
Yeah, congratulations. And so
Thank
before we get in the heart of our conversation with distance learning and 6 foot Phi Ed, you know, social distancing and Phi Ed, you know, just like in our lessons, we have to start with an instant activity or a warm-up activity. And we've got some tough questions that if they didn't ask you on your Shape America Teacher of the Year, they probably should have.
Yeah.
I mean, these are some pretty intense things. So, you know, number one, could you share with us your funniest moment as a teacher?
Oh God. So get ready for your beep. So, I mean, there's the funny thing is, like, people have said over the years, you should write some of this stuff down just so you remember it. And there's been a lot of good ones, and I can't remember most of them.
Mm-hmm.
This one was one that I remember just because it was such a mistake that I think I made, that to me it's funny. So early in my career, in my gymnasium, we have the varsity gymnastics team set up their equipment in half of our gym. So I don't want to say we lose the gym, but for 4 months of the year, the varsity gymnastics equipment is up, and we have to rotate and make do. We have two sides of the gym. It's an elementary school, but it's a middle school sized gymnasium, and so we go through these rotations where we're doing gymnastics, or I learned a model in college called kidnastics from a professor. And one of the apparatus that I'm teaching a skill on, I was an older grade level, so it was either maybe grade 4, 5, 3, something like that. I was teaching a skill on the balance beam. And there's a skill where you're standing on the beam and you have to sit down on the beam. It was called the V-sit, where you would have to try to get your way down, hold the beam, put your feet up, and lift them up. And I got my words jumbled up. And as a new teacher, you tend to make tons and tons of mistakes. And so in front of an entire class, I'm trying to explain about, like, not rushing to sit down on the beam. And it came out as shit on the beam. And this is in front of the entire class. And the thing is, I instantly knew what I did. And I kept rolling with it. So I didn't really give the kids time to be like, did he just say shit on the beam? And nobody picked up on it, which after the fact, I'm like, yes, I didn't screw up that badly.
Right over their heads.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, because, like, if you flat out stop and be like, oh, kids, I'm so sorry. I mean, that'll never go away.
Yeah.
So I just kept rolling with it. And hey, I got away with it.
Oh, man. And being an early teacher, you didn't know how to adapt to that too. Just being there, and that your brain's thinking about so many things when
Right.
you're starting to teach. It's just hard to get through those things.
Well, and even now it seems like our language, you know, we play with volleyballs, we play with basketballs, we play with softballs. We don't play with any just regular ball. We play with volleyballs, right, softballs, basketballs, baseballs. Call them by their names so you don't get caught with the.
And some of them are the color blue.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
And so you have to think about that.
So then, my next question for you, something I had to learn the hard way. To share, you know, I spent some time in the Marine Corps, and I thought, you know, my first year teaching and coming out of the Marine Corps, I'm going to apply some of these structures and strategies from the Marine Corps, and I'm going to put that right in my elementary classroom. And I learned very quickly that does not work at all. So that's something I learned the hard way. So professionally or personally, can you share with us something you learned the hard way?
I mean, as a new teacher over the years, I can honestly pinpoint a couple of things that are difficult for lots of people. Discipline, tends to be very difficult. In fact, I reflect back to my undergrad experience, and I remember doing it as a unit in one of my classes, but not as a class. And I feel like that's something you should have, you should try to be under control. Time management is another one that a lot of newer teachers struggle with. On a side note, I learned the hard way, learning when to keep your mouth shut and learning when not to. So as a new teacher, I would tend to get very frustrated. And I remember I was frustrated about a colleague and I would just vent. And I didn't realize I was venting to this colleague's friends, and what goes around comes around sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I learned the hard way that, sometimes you vent quietly.
Yeah.
And you kind of keep that internally and, kind of keep your mouth shut and not respond so quickly. And it's a shame I had to learn that.
Yeah. Oh.
Been there, done that.
I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I look back at, I wish somebody would have told me that 15 years ago.
For sure. Oh, man.
I don't do that now. I now have a good sense of who I can vent to and who I don't vent to. And yeah.
Which is still healthy to have.
Yeah.
Right.
You do need it.
Yeah, trial and error. It's really trial and error. And they say a lot about experience. Like, experience really helps. You learn from experience, good and bad. And it's so totally true.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think that's a piece of it. I mean, it's kind of off the subject, but it is great insight. Yes, any successful business leader or anything, and you've learned the most from your failures. You've learned the most from your mistakes. And it's how you react to that, how you pick yourself up and dust yourself off and move forward, determines the level of success you're going to have. So it is a great lesson for everybody.
For sure.
So then let's segue. We're here in Minnesota. We're coming at the tail end of our distance learning experience. We were finishing our last few weeks of school here, and looking back at things we've done. But if you would take some time and just share with us what you've done with your students as far as your distance learning experience goes.
So I like to describe this distance learning as triage teaching in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
So the good news is I was able to collaborate very well with my colleagues. I have 2 teachers. There's 3 full-time PE teachers in my school, and we've collaborated together on lessons. Our district is a Google platform district, and so I have Google Classroom, and I set 6 classes, 1 for every grade level that I teach. Some of the grade levels that I teach, I only have 1 class. So like, for example, my 5th grade, I have 1 5th grade class, but I also teach 3 kindergarten. And so I lump them in that. And what we really have done is we tried to come up with a common theme for the week. So in my normal teaching, this is not a problem because I do something what I call the spiral theme approach, where it's not a traditional 2 to 3 week unit that I teach. What I do is I'll teach a 1 week unit, and I'll tend to break them up over the course of 2 to 3 weeks throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if you think about like a foot-eye soccer sort of unit, I wouldn't do 2 to 3 weeks of it, and that's the end of it. And so during the regular school year, I would do maybe a week of it in the fall, and I would revisit it in the wintertime, building upon those skills, and then I would revisit it again in the spring. With the distance learning, it's not entirely that, but what we've tried to do is come up with like a mini spiral where we would have a set concept for 1 week, and then the following week we're on a completely different concept because we didn't know how long this was going to last. We didn't know, with time and what sort of resources. And so every single week we have a different theme. We have lumped together. We planned in like an online lesson plan where 3 to 5 are really doing the same lesson, where we will tweak our questioning to student to get feedback, and same thing for K to 2. And so we try to make it as age appropriate as possible. Mm-hmm. I'm not a firm believer in reinventing the wheel. As you guys probably already know, on Twitter and on social media, there are some outstanding physical educators out there that are posting material and they're sharing their material. And the way that I think that I've always stated is that, your kids don't care whether or not you made it up or somebody else did, as long as it, it meets the needs of what you're trying to teach and what you're getting across in your lessons and your assessments. And so a lot of times what we will do with a typical lesson is that we will have the theme, we will have a warm up that we do. It might be a videotaped thing that I do. It might be a link that I've taken off of Twitter from another colleague. We will have like the lesson component of it. And then we have a closure where we would post a couple of fairly easy-ish sort of questioning to make sure that there's some sort of retention. We also wanted to give kids the option, because of everyone's own things going on. They could respond with like a picture. They could respond with a video of them doing it. And the thing that was really difficult for me to understand in the beginning is that in one district, it could be, the disparity can be completely, there could be a huge wide range out there, from like people who they have spotty Wi-Fi or internet, where both parents are working and they're not home, where you're taking care of a sibling. I even know of one family in my district where I think there's something like 4 or 5 kids, and they're sharing mom's hotspot. So if they're ranging from high school to elementary school, how do they even have the time to do it?
Yeah.
It's been a challenge. We have set the precedent with our kids that we wanted them to mark as done or turn in comments and assignments, and that would be one way for us to stay on top of them to make sure that they're doing our work. And it's unfortunate because of what's going on, and I know this isn't just with me. This is across everywhere. We've had lots of kids who have done it, and we have a lot of kids that have not done it, and it could be for various reasons. There's lots of challenges going on. And so I've heard that whole, I don't know if you guys have heard of that adage about like learning how to fly the plane while you're doing it, that sort of thing. I mean, that in a lot of sense is kind of how it was. I mean, I'm lucky to say my district was great with pushing out what they felt was a good overall experience and guidelines for us, like providing feedback, daily feedback, making sure you're on every day, making sure the kids see you to some degree, whether it's like a Zoom or a Google Meet or just posting material. But it's been really challenging on both sides, well, not only myself, but the kids and the parents.
Did you keep track of numbers to get approximate percentages, or did you?
No, it's a guesstimate, and it really ranges. My kindergarten and their parents, they're phenomenal. I want to say 60% are doing it. One of my other grade levels, which I'm not going to say because I don't want anyone seeing this get upset, 25% are doing it. And, you're supposed to give feedback. So when a kid turns in a lesson and they didn't respond to your feedback, to your question, I'm responding to them to try to get them to do it. Gee, Tommy, I think it's great that you did this today. Thank you for turning it in. What did you think about the activity? How did it affect you with your heart rate or whatever it is we're doing that day?
Yeah.
And some of the time they respond, and unfortunately, some of the time they don't.
Yeah.
And that's, to be honest, that's pretty much the averages of what we've been hearing from educators, especially in elementary. Now, so we get the feeling that in the high school world, they have quite a bit, the participation is a little bit higher. It might, due to a number of factors of individual independence and things like that. But elementary, it's been, hovering, I'd say right around that 50%, and actually turning in assignments, it drops from there.
Yeah. And the one thing that I've noticed as well, and I don't know if you can agree with me or not, is the whole mentality of physical activity versus physical education. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if your experience is the same, but I've heard from people that kids are staying active. And I forgot to say this earlier. In New York State, we are a mandated subject, and it's 120 minutes of PE per week. And the lessons that we push out, we would normally see kids 3 days a week for 40 minutes of physical education, K-5. And most likely they're not getting that. So we put out a choice board where we encourage kids to do additional activity. But it's wonderful that a kid is being physically active and doing stuff on their own time, but it's not the same thing as a physical education and why they're learning certain things. Yeah. And that's something I think that parents should, you can't jump down their throat about them because they have their own stuff going on, but at the same time, they should be aware of physical activity and physical education. They're different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. if you happen to glance back at some of the past podcasts, that's been kind of a reoccurring discussion about giving grace to parents. Like you just nailed, every different household is handling this different and is under different stress levels. You can't jump down somebody's throat for saying, hey, you know what, I think my kid's out riding bike two times a day. He's outside kicking that soccer ball around. I am not going to put the time into doing a PE lesson. You can't fault them for that.
No.
But I guess where it came to for us, the big discussion was when I made some comments on Facebook or Twitter about that. It seemed like our community, a large part of our community, kind of jumped down my throat and said, that's all we should expect right now. We can't do more than that. And I was like, oh boy, if we're the ones saying that, I don't get a good feeling about that, because that could really bite us later.
Yes.
If we're just equivalating activity with education, physical education, then we might just be replaced with, they just tell you what, instead of hiring you at a PE as a PE teacher, we're just going to drop PE and we're going to have you be a recess monitor and have you play games out there, and we'll pay you half as much. That's what I fear. And maybe I shouldn't fear it. Maybe it's an overstatement, but that's what I feel kind of like you're getting at in around behind the words you're saying there.
Well, Stacey, I don't know if you saw on Twitter today, there was a district in Massachusetts. You read about that? Where they dumped all specials. And I tweeted a response just because I was livid about that. This district does not respect special areas in that district, just flat out. And the second side is exactly what you said. Like there's this stereotype in our profession that doesn't seem to leave, that whole laziness, roll the ball out sort of mentality. And, just to be a professional in our jobs. Yeah. I mean, to think about job security, right. We're non-academic teachers. We do mean a lot, but we have to constantly try to prove ourselves too. And some people are doing it and some people aren't.
Yeah.
So I think that'll definitely, because we'll come back to that as we look to the some of where Fayette is heading here. But I'm actually curious on the relationship side and building connections with your students. How were you able to accomplish that in a virtual setting?
It's not easy because of the distance. I know that the kids love seeing me, because when I'm in school, you get your name called 8 trillion times a day, and you get all those hugs, which make the 6 foot physical, 6 foot PE very difficult.
Yep.
I try to connect with them by just being real with them, and when I comment, and not trying to be on a positive with the kids, because like the parents, the kids are all struggling as well. They're missing out on things at home. They're missing out with their friends. Yep. They're not getting a normal school experience. So trying to show myself. So in some of the activities that I'll post, to make sure that it's me. There's been a couple of them where my daughter was in there with me, and I know kids really get a kick of, oh my God, that's your kid. And just the engaging piece, the back and forth of it. If a kid takes the time to give me a really well thought out, thorough answer, or their parent helps them push out to me a video of them doing it, what's not to love about that? I want the kid to know how happy and excited I am that they're doing it, that it means something. It's as worthwhile to me as, say, math work that they're doing, or reading, or spelling.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I heard you say that as part of when you were describing what you were doing, that you really seem to focus on that feedback part. And I tell you what, that when I got a chance to do that, again, you have to get the kids to your classroom in order to give them feedback. But that by the end became the thing for my heart. Was I had to give up on the ones that weren't showing up, because it was crushing me, it was frustrating me. And at some point, my wife helped me kind of understand that, you still got 160 kids showing up. I know it's not 100%, but that's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
They're getting a good quality education. And then that kind of just clicked with me. Just, you know what, I'm going to focus on those kids that are showing up And when they submit some, I'm going to be super excited. And that's what I heard you saying, is that you're giving them feedback. When they do give you something, you get right back at it.
Right. And they value it, because they are doing it. I mean, yeah, there might be mom or dad saying, did you do all the work today? But, at the elementary level, I mean, you guys are rock stars, the kids love you. And, when they show you that they're working hard at whatever it is that you're trying to get across to the kids, that should be, celebrated and approved, and, that get them hooked. You want them hooked at PE.
Yeah.
That's a big part that I found irreplaceable, was when we were in our classes, we are the superheroes, and they want that gratification from their superhero. When they do something cool, they want to hear that good job, or that pat on the back, or the hug, or whatever it is. And it's kind of like you had said, we jumped out of the we're flying the airplane, we're learning how to fly it. We jumped out of the airplane, we're flipping to chapter 3 to see how to open up this parachute.
Yeah.
It's total triage. And so a lot of mistakes have been made. And there's, personally, it's been a lot of lessons of, I'll never do that again, or I'll definitely do that differently. And as we move forward and start looking to next year, where this may be another possibility, is we can take the growth that we've made these last 8 to 10 weeks and do it, make vast improvements.
And that probably, in my opinion, will happen to some degree. I mean, this is unprecedented. This has never happened in, as far as I know, with history of modern education, where people have had to do this like this.
Yeah.
And so it is. It's like doing a test or an experiment when you have to do it when it counts, and it's hard.
Well, it's introducing quantum physics in the kindergarten curriculum. I mean, it's just something we don't do, something that's way outside what anybody would have ever thought of.
Yeah. Something that Mike Ginicola, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
yes,
he had mentioned is, when you get pushed to distance learning, you start where you left off. In other words, you are that person. If you are a really relational person in class, you will probably have that relationship started with those kids. If you are more of a, maybe your strengths lie in other areas of designing a great games and that kind of thing, but a little bit less interpersonal, well, then you'll probably have those same strengths there. And it just seems like, from hearing you just for this short time I've been talking to you, you just sound super relational. Like you are just really into giving those kids feedback. Would you say that's true in your classroom as well?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I never want to turn a kid off to physical education and physical activity.
Mm-hmm.
I am not in the business of creating athletes at all. I want all kids to be successful. I have several things that I do with my own teaching. Like I have certain principles that I always reflect on. Like I do the KISS principle to myself, trying to keep things as simple as I can, and I can layer on there. I want kids to have lots of choice, and it could be a task where they get to choose the type of equipment that they have. And I don't want to be one of these, I mean, I've heard different ways people call it, like a PE lifeguard, where I'm just supervising the activity and letting them go. My job is to teach. I want to let a kid know if I can help them improve on a skill or a concept. I want to know what they're learning and reflecting. And I try my best to connect with all the kids. And you guys can probably tell that's really challenging, especially if you have a class with a lot of children in it. But I mean, they look up to you, and you have a job to do. And if you care about your job, which the majority of people out there do, it's not just a paycheck. I want to connect with my kids and see how they're doing, what they're learning.
For sure. Before we get too far off the subject, would you mind throwing out, what were a couple of your themes that you used? You said weekly themes.
Yeah. So similar to some of the other things that I've heard on your podcast. So one week that we did was more of a dance, sort of rhythm and dance theme. One was based on MVPA and fitness. Okay. In the course of a school year, we would normally teach grades 3, 4, and 5 in my school how to monitor and find their pulse, your carotid artery, your radial artery. We would do activities which would help them engage to get their heart rate up, and they would have to try to monitor themselves the way that we taught it them in school. Mm-hmm. And being that it's being that it's Google Classroom, I would create, a slide where I would have a picture of the person taking their carotid pulse or their radial pulse to help the child to remember, oh yeah, that's how we did it in class. There was a bunch of times where 1 week was on skill. And I remember there was one based on foot eye. There was one more on, for the younger kids, on the overhand throw, the underhand throw, difference between throwing and rolling, stuff that we've already covered, but more of like a second round review that I could do at home. I think another week we did was challenges. So we would say, kind of like how I think Mike does the whole gamification model, similar to that, where it's like, can you do this? And are you able to do it for how many can you do in a minute? And how many things can you do against another person? Sometimes it's really difficult to do these because if you're at home and you don't have a basketball, you don't have a hockey stick,
right?
How do you do it? How do you juggle when you don't have juggling scarves or a juggling ball? And so, we try to have that theme. And the great thing about these lessons is that I was able to rely on my other colleagues. We would plan it in a shared drive, and we would all Google Meet and we would go over it. And is that age appropriate? Do you think that it would be too difficult to do at home? And that really helped a ton. For people that have to teach by themselves in a school, that, in their own department, that could be really challenging if you have no one to bounce ideas off of.
Yeah. Wow. It really sounds like you were able to integrate using the connection you had with the students, and then integrate the connection or the content right in and build on it week after week. And it wasn't any more overwhelming to have them do content versus just throwing out a video where they just, follow up to somebody else's video or something. Sounds like you were really able to integrate content and creativity and that connection piece all right with each other. That just sounds like a well-rounded several weeks of PE these kids got. Hey, Jamie, that was a fantastic section. I got a feeling this little riff section you and I are going to do right now is going to last a little bit longer than the average one, because there was so much there to unpack. I'm kind of excited to talk about it. But before I jump into my stuff, what jumped out at you first? What'd you like?
Well, first of all, when we asked him about his distance learning experience, he said, don't reinvent the wheel. Kids don't care if you made it or if somebody else did it. And it just jumped out at me because we've always been talking about the connection piece and connection over the content. So that statement right there kind of caught me off guard, but I said that there's a lot more that goes into that, just that little statement. You really have to dig deep into the thinking mind.
Unpack that a little bit. Say more about what you think he really meant.
Well, I think he meant exactly what he said. He said kids don't care who made it. His next sentence or his next statement was, as long as it goes with what you're trying to teach. And that really got into the thinking. We talk thinking PE. What's he thinking? How do good teachers plan their lessons? What do good teachers think about? And it was that idea of having a well thought out, purposeful, meaningful, planned out instruction that meant something to the student. He was compiling resources to meet whatever standard it was that he was trying to teach.
Yeah. But it sounded almost at the surface, or the first, when he said it, he was almost saying, or what I was interpreting it as is, hey, if you can just find things other people have done, just put it on there. And that kind of goes against some of the things we're hearing from other teachers about. No, we want this to be purposeful and thoughtful. And that's kind of what you're kind of bringing around to say. He's kind of, I don't know, again, looping it around in a different way. I guess the way I was trying to explain it in my mind to you earlier is, it's like he says, didn't he talked about having a theme?
Yeah,
that idea?
They had a weekly theme. Yeah,
so with that theme, it wasn't just like a Harry Potter theme, even though he might have included some creative stuff like that. His theme was based around like the standard they were trying to accomplish or the unit. And so it seemed like that gave him maybe like a container you know, the theme is like the container, and now you could add content into that container all you want to, and it makes it purposeful rather than just random, hey, that's a cool video, that's a Star Wars video, that's a, you know, a different dance video, and hey, well, this person did a really good yoga video. Not just random fun activities. He thinks out the theme, they think out what do we want the kids to learn, and then they start placing these great content into that container. I don't know, does that make any sense to you, or did I just
you know, it really does, because you know, he talked about how in the beginning, you know, they have the warm up, and maybe they create it so the kids were still seeing his face and hearing his voice, which is important. But he wasn't spending all of his time. He wasn't spending hours upon hours reinventing the wheel, just like he said. And the trade-off for that, where he made his connections, was in the feedback to the students, and that's where that Google platform came. He spent his time, I say, making connections with the students, whether it's, you know, responding to their feedback, responding to videos, responding to emails, or whatever the students were doing to connect with him. That's where he dedicated his time. And, you know, kind of going back to your pot analogy, you only have so much time in this pot.
Yeah.
And if you're, like you had said before, you know, before we started recording here, if you're spending 12 hours creating videos, you know, that's great, but you know, you need some time to make connections, direct connections with the kids.
Yeah, or you're going to fry out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're just not going to be able to continue that pace. And you and I kind of felt that when we did a lot of creative stuff early on, and we were starting a podcast, and, you know, well, we had COVID, we couldn't go anywhere. So we were kind of like, well, why not put it, you know, 12 hours in and 14 hours in? Well, my wife still reminds me of the time I put in. She said, you were doing 17-hour days, and you can do that for a while, but that's not healthy. And that's not a good balance. And as PE teachers, if we really want to keep going for a full year, we've got to cut back somewhere. And it seemed like he was saying, hey, do it here. Pull us. If somebody else put 12 hours into something, grab that if it fits
And that was the key.
Your container of what you're trying to teach. But you've got to have those containers first. You've got to have those, he called them themes. You've got to have, we call them standards. We call them, you know, units. You've got to have it fit. But then it was kind of interesting that his whole concept was, yeah, we got that connection piece. He talked about that like most teachers do. But then he raised kind of the level of importance of adding content. He said it's really important, and it's really not that much harder to have good quality content than it is just random activities for kids to do, which I guess in some ways leads into that discussion about FIAD versus PE. You know, what is busy network? What is
FIAD versus PA? FIAD versus physical activity.
I'm sorry. Yeah, FIAD versus PE. That, I have a hard time distinguishing the difference between that one. Say it again so we get it right. It's FIAD versus
PA.
Physical activity. Yeah, just keeping kids busy, or keeping them busy with a real purpose where you can really measure growth and keep kids, so not only you can measure growth, but they can see growth. I don't know. I think that's important as well.
You know, I keep going back. It's really cool to hear. Just use your resources. You know, create your stuff, make your connections with the kids, but use your resources. And there's all kinds of outlets out there to use those resources. I mean, from the national level at you know, Open PE has some great stuff that you can use, and Shape America has stuff that you can use. But then, you know, you have individuals throughout the nation that have created some pretty cool stuff. We had the opportunity to speak with Mike Ginicola out there in New York as well, and he's got some stuff on his website at Phys Ed Depot. Mr. Randy Spring, you know, right here in the great state of Minnesota, he's got some great stuff at Mr. Spring PE. So, you know, you can check out those resources and tie them into your meaningful lessons.
Absolutely. And from there, you're going to be linked to other great educators that have done some super creative stuff out there as well. No, I like that. One other thing I wanted to swing back to, I just kind of liked his idea of, I'm calling it looping, where he talked about teaching something, but not teaching the whole thing, and then you're done for the year. The idea of you touch on this, and then you swing back, and that gives you a chance to assess how much the kids have grown. It gives you a chance to find those few students that maybe, you know, really didn't have that skill, and you check back 2-3 weeks or maybe a month or two later. I just kind of like that idea of not just doing a unit, okay, I got our soccer unit done. We're not doing any more kicking now. The idea of coming back to it. I don't know. Is that kind of how you run yours, or how do you think about that whole concept?
I'm growing more and more into that concept of, we're not teaching a football unit, we're teaching throwing and catching. We're using football activities to teach throwing and catching. And I think we get in a real, it's easy to get in that habit of, we're doing a hockey unit and it's one and done. We do hockey for 3 weeks and then we don't revisit it until the next year. And, some of that's equipment set up and those things, but it makes me think, how easy would it be to get those sticks out just for a quick instant activity or something along those lines, to revisit those sort of skills, or combine those skills.
Yeah.
Whether it's kicking, how many different ways can we teach kicking throughout the year? So I really, really like that model.
Yeah. And you and I have talked about even maybe starting to rename our units, even in our lesson plans. Mm-hmm. Instead of a soccer unit, it's a foot coordination unit, or instead of hockey, it's an implement unit, that type of a thing, where it kind of just gets you out of that mindset of, oh, that's done, because later on you think, well, instead of a stick for a long handle implement, what other long handle implements do I have? And I could bring something else around 3 weeks later, or a month later, or in the spring, or that type of idea, just to kind of get us out of that rut. I mean, I don't know if it makes a big difference or not, but just you and I had just kind of thrown that idea out, just start renaming it to see if it gets us out of the old habits.
Yeah. And so in this next part here, we get an opportunity. We're going to talk to Don about the state of physical education. Where's our profession going? And we got to peek in the mind of what's happening at the national level. So let's take a listen. Let's shift gears and talk. We kind of touched on it a little bit, but just the state of physical education as we sit. We talked a little bit. Massachusetts has cut their specials. That district in Massachusetts has cut their specials for next year, and we like to say, with this distance learning, what it did do, good or bad, is it put our curriculum on full display. And in many ways, it put our curriculum in display in a glass house. Everybody can see what we're doing, and for some that's really good, and for some that's going to be really bad. And we just kind of want to chat about what some of those potential unseen ramifications, or the obstacles and barriers that we've created now in our profession.
Well, I mean, kind of like what we reiterated earlier in our discussion. I mean, that whole physical activity versus physical education. If I can just have some kid show me that they're moving, that could count for PE. We definitely don't want that. Maybe it'll step up people's game, where somebody that did that disjointed, what we were just discussing, where they just put out clips, or they said, do this fitness log and no feedback. Maybe there it will show, there's a couple of things we need to work on to improve with that. So, in a positive sense, maybe that will help with better teaching and quality of teaching. Another positive can be, well, now more parents are familiar with what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's Mr. Tobin. Was that one of the type of activities that he does in school? Well, why does he do that? To get that conversation going with the kids. But as a side note, I mean, like you said, because we're very visible now among people at home, we have to step up our game and show that we are important. It is worthwhile not only to educating the whole child, but there's a lot of positive to it. As a lot of teachers do out there, and people do the crossover with the whole academic area in a special area. And there's a lot of meaningful pedagogical stuff that's happening. I don't know if I said that correctly.
For me.
So
it worked for me. I got you.
It's close enough.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it also, there's things that we're going to have to tweak and fix up and clean up as we move forward, and for sure.
And I would even say relationships. We found the value and the importance of maintaining and building relationships, even in a distance learning setting. And in my opinion, we're in some ways able to just kind of ride the wave that we established from the beginning of the year, and we already had the relationships with the students. Mm-hmm. So we could continue those. But now going into next year, especially with kindergarten students or your new students you have, we have to start from the ground up and build those relationships. And what challenges do you see, or how do you see yourself building those relationships at the start of next school year if we're in a distance learning setting?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So like I've heard of several scenarios that on my end that I've heard could happen. And obviously it's a very open-ended thing because none of us know what's going to happen. I've heard of the model of the whole A-B day where half of a class would go in and then they would alternate. Although I don't know how that would, parents that work, how do you do that with childcare if you have young kids? I've heard of another model where the staff is in school and the kids are home, so that it'd be a little bit easier maybe to videotape yourself doing lessons in your environment. That I'm a little bit more in favor of that than the A-B day, because I do want to connect the kids and see them. It's going to be tough. It's the engagement piece, I think, to make sure that people are turned on. Yes, yes, this is distance learning, but yes, this is school. And your kindergartner, your first grader, they would normally have this over the course of their day at school. And part of it is physical education. Part of it is art, is music. It should be moving forward, in my opinion, as important. It might be really difficult for a kindergartner because they're learning, like, think about school routines, walking down the hallway with their class. I mean, that's a teachable, right? Lining up is a teachable skill. In my PE program, I always greet the kids out in the hallway. I check for understanding. I never just allow them to go in my gym. I invite them in the gym, learning how to not go smashing into the walls or each other. These are concepts that we do from day one that we're going to have to try to get across somehow. It's not like what we've done where we already knew our kids. These are brand new kids who have no clue who you are. And so I think that's something we have to be cognizant about in the fall, that, maybe our lessons aren't like what we've done the past 12, 13 weeks, that they have to be like it's the beginning of the year.
I've been wrapping my brain around that. You just talked about the running into the wall, but wrapping my brain around, being able to teach our standards. And you take a tag game in kindergarten, and why do we do tag games? Well, number one, it's accepting being tagged. You're learning that skill, but you're also learning that skill of moving in space safely. Yes. And how do you teach that in a virtual setting? And that's going to be the challenge.
Yeah, the whole concept of personal versus general space, that they're going to need to learn it somehow, whether it's through a video, through graphics, through questioning. The kindergartners don't know how to use, I'm assuming a lot of them don't know how to use Google Drive and how to get on. So you're going to need to rely on the parents a lot. They're already going to be bombarded with lots of things from all aspects of school life. I think that my old personal model of keeping it simple is pretty important. Getting bang for your buck with what you're planning to get across the concept you want them to get, but not making it too complex for them.
Yeah. But I like where you're going, that simple does not necessarily mean without meaning. We don't have to just go to just physical activity. We can still be physical educators and keep it simple and have a point and have a purpose. And maybe it'll force us to be even more so that way, where we're really going to have to scrutinize ourselves and say, what is the single purpose I want to get across instead of 3 or 4 in this lesson? Let's make it simple. Let's get down to 1. And it might make us better teachers in the end, being able to really hone in on what is the most important thing I want to get across today, that type of a thing.
And to piggyback on that, if and when we go back to the way it used to be, these kids are going to need to know what you're talking about, because it's not that they're exposed to it for the first time. You already covered this. This is something. Right. This is a concept of, making sure that I'm keeping my own space, that I'm sharing equipment, that I'm making sure. And I'm not even going to specifics like stepping with your opposite foot for doing a skill. I'm talking about basic stuff.
Yeah, I love that point that you just made there. I think that's going to be a huge point of what we're going to have to do in the fall. That's a fantastic idea. if and when things get back to the way things were, kids need to know what you're talking about. Wow, what a statement.
Yeah, I want to give that some wait time. Just let that soak in for a little bit, because what I took from that right away is we don't want to stunt kids' growth. And I'm not talking about them staying short or not growing
Right.
by their height, but stunting their physical skills, that during this distance learning piece, or if you're in a hybrid model of kids are in school one day and not in school the other day, that making that purposeful, meaningful instruction throughout their entire school week.
Yeah.
And just like Don had said, where you may have a weekly theme every day of that week, or every time they come to your special, whether it's virtually or in class, that they're getting that purposeful and meaningful instruction to help them grow according to our national standards.
Yeah, I think that's going to be key. And I love the fact that he's thinking about eventually they're coming back. You need to have some of those things all in order. And you don't want to have to go back and reteach everything that you would have taught at the beginning of the year.
Oh,
We
yeah.
want to jump right in and let's go. Let's get this this train going.
And truthfully, what an immediate formative assessment on the quality of your distance learning experience.
Yeah.
Is when the kids come back and they can remember they remember or are able to apply some concept that you taught during distance learning. That's a pretty good sign that you had an effective distance learning experience.
No, yeah, I like that language. Formative assessment on your teaching, not just what they're learning, but how you're teaching. Absolutely. And he also really kind of pointed out that this year's going to be different. Last year we had the relationships already.
Mm-hmm.
This year we got to start from scratch, which means we got to do what we do in every year. And this came out in some of the 6 Feet PE podcasts we did. Some of the teachers were mentioning that. What do you do at the beginning of every year? You establish, your not just your rules, but your routines and a lot of things you're establishing that you can still do even
start learning names.
Yep, it's just amazing. It's amazing, but yet it's not. It's right. It's not rocket science at all. It's like foundations of teaching 101 here. So I kind of like how he reminded us of that as he was talking about that there. So
in another piece, we talked a little bit more about the PE versus PA, the physical education versus the physical activity. And we got talking about the glass house again. On our curriculum and our teaching is in full display. And there's 2 ways to approach that. You can approach that nervously or approach that as an opportunity. And I encourage everybody to take it as an opportunity that now we always want people to know what we're doing, and we want to show parents what we're doing. Well, what a great opportunity.
Yeah, there's going to be, maybe for the first time ever, almost every parent will know what the gym teacher looks like.
Yeah.
Whereas I think there's times where we get put in our gym and we do our thing, and I don't want to knock that. It's great. We do a good job, and frankly, parents don't worry about it. That's why they don't know who the PE teacher is, because they know you're doing a good job. But here, where you might be distance learning or hybrid, or in some ways you're going to be in more communication with the parents, and yeah, there's positives to everything. Let's take this, use it as a positive, and take advantage of it and build those relationships as well as the ones with the students.
It kind of goes on to answer that ongoing question. How can we advocate for our profession? What do we need to do to promote our profession? And I mean, it's being done for us.
Yep.
Now you get a chance to show your great teaching, show your great curriculum, show what you're doing. Say it's on full display, so take good advantage of it.
Yeah, and if you are really putting a lot of thought, and you're putting a purposeful, and it's organized, and you're taking students from A to B, you are going to be able to stand up for PE and demand. I use the word demand. I don't know if that's a great term, but just the fact that it's so well laid out commands respect. Mm-hmm. It is a true educational piece of the whole big part of education. And so I think when you get your email that comes to you and asks, hey, is it okay if my kid just rides bike today for PE? you can still be respectful of that parent and say, hey, that's fantastic that they're being active. But boy, being active is very different than what we're doing here. I hate for your kid to miss out on this content that we're really providing. And if they have been part of it at all, they're going to see that this is way more thought out and it's way different than just riding your bike and getting your heart rate up for a bit. I don't know, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really like that. You know, let's go back to we were talking earlier about having this big container of content, and and you know, respecting that the parents can be overwhelmed in the distance learning experience. We all have different things going on. I mean, Donna talked about maybe not even having Wi-Fi connection, but respecting that you know, hey, it's great that your kid's being active. We want them to be active, but we also don't want them to miss this awesome content that we have going on over here to help them learn and help them grow. So
Yeah.
if you get that opportunity, we don't want you to miss that. You know, I've got some great things. I want to learn about your student. I want to be able to interact with your student.
Yeah.
Or your child, I should say. So I think that's an important piece. And as we move into this next segment here, we throw the idea of hashtag 6 feet PE at Donn. And, you know, with the preface that this is the first we really started talking about it. You know, some districts right now, as this podcast is coming out, some districts have already laid out their plan for the fall, and some districts are just kind of toying with the ideas of hybrid models. It's 6 feet, mask, no mask. And what I found really interesting now going back and listening is what Donn is about to tell us, it doesn't matter what model your school district is going to be in. It's all very, very applicable. So let's go ahead and take a listen. So just speaking of the fall, and Stacy and I were actually going to write a book. We've got a title. We call it 6 feet PE. It doesn't have any pages. We don't have a table of contents. We don't have an introduction. We don't have words in this book yet. It is completely blank, but we got a nice title. We were hoping, you know, just to wrap our heads around, just start brainstorming about this idea of social distancing and physical education. And you know, that is a possible scenario at the start of next school year that we are practicing social distancing and still trying to teach. So do you have any ideas of conceivably what that might even look like or how we would start our book?
So do I get any royalties from this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You get twice what we get.
Yeah, right. So I was thinking about this myself, because if you just think about equipment, I mean, sharing equipment, it might have to be a lot of task-oriented stuff where a child is assigned a specific piece of equipment, and part of your protocol is the cleanup aspect of it. I mean, you know, how do you, if you're using let's say you're using a scoop with a ball, that scoop and that ball is that child's piece of equipment, which it would normally be anyway. But now it really has to be that. And then when the class is over, I mean, in my school, when one class leaves, another class is waiting to come in. We don't have 5 minutes. That has to be disinfected appropriately. That's safe for the kid. That's safe for me. That's safe for our program. I can almost envision, like, a lot of the traditional activities you might have done in the past, you might need to rethink and go to more skill and concept. I've been placed on it's a COVID task force by New York State AFERD, where they're going to try to come up with some mission statement guidelines towards physical education in New York State. And I'm on one of the committees, and this is something that we're going to be talking about, like what would be considered appropriate for quality education in an environment like this. And we haven't met yet. Like, I haven't met with these people yet, but it's coming.
No, but those are some good points, whether it's task oriented and structure. You know, two things that we already do that you can kind of think about and kind of manipulate how you do things. But just like you said, a task oriented, but build the cleaning into your structure or whatever. And it's like anything we do is you set a routine.
Right.
So I mean, those are two really good points.
There was something that we were doing in the very beginning before school let out from home. In my gym, we have the hand sanitizers that are attached to the walls. And after speaking with our principal, we had a protocol where when kids would have already cleaned their hands in the classroom, when they come to us at the time, they would go through PE, and then they wouldn't step foot out the door of the gym without getting a squirt and rubbing it and sending on your way. And that was something that at least made us think about it, because we always encourage kids to do that anyway. Like, if you go to the bathroom, you're going to wash your hands. If you forget to, you use at least a hand sanitizer. But it was, do you hand sanitize before you walk in the gym? Do you hand sanitize on the way out? When you go from your the gymnasium to your classroom, does the first thing you do is do the same thing again? I mean, you guys know with little ones, touching their face, it happens all the time. Hugging each other and touching everything and them touching what you're touching. I mean, you got to think about that stuff.
But a lot of that, it sounds overwhelming, but just your statement of routines, if we develop it into our routines, like anything, you're going to have your headaches with whether it's teaching kindergartners how to line up. Believe it or not, that doesn't go smoothly the first time. And as we develop it, as we develop it and as we correct it and develop it in our routines, and then they just become a regular part of our class.
Yeah.
And just for fun, I might just tell my kindergarten class without any instruction to just go sanitize before they leave, just to see what would happen.
Just make a statement and see what happens.
Yeah.
Make sure you have the camera rolling.
Yeah, right. You have to stand there and monitor every kid, one squirt. Or you also have the kid that will take like 45 squirts all over the place. They'll slap their hands and
Yep.
Right.
Just use what you think is necessary. Kids up there with a bucket.
Right. Yeah, let's make it rain. Let's just make it rain. One of the things to kind of go back to the whole teacher of the year thing, you don't get to these levels by yourself. You get to those levels because of other people. Yeah. And we're all doing the best we can in our jobs. It's not a one-upmanship at all. It's really, if you come up with an idea that's really going to work for me in this whole situation or scenario, I'm absolutely going to incorporate that and make it mine.
Go back to in our classes, we preach to our students a growth mindset, have a growth mindset. And if you go back to the beginning of distance learning and talked about, we have to do this distance learning thing, and how many people said it can't be done. We can't do this. And look how far we've come. And the skills and the strategies that we've learned. And I think a lot of it with the 6-foot PE, it's the same thing. At this point right now, it can't be done, but we're just starting to talk about it. And as the conversations that we have, task-oriented routines, it's a start. It's a start, and we'll build on it from there.
It's a start. And for our own growth and for our own perseverance in physical education, we need to do this. Mm-hmm. You can't have your head buried in the sand. You have to get out of your comfort zone. I mean, just think about this. There may be teaching areas where if they're trying to distance kids, one of the best places you could do that is in a gymnasium. So maybe that is now classroom space and you're going to have to teach somewhere else. I mean, we're professionals. We love kids. We have to make it work and just be prepared that your normal teaching environment might not be that way come September.
Well, and Stacy and I talked about, so how can you teach racket sports in a classroom? And rather than tell me the 50 ways that it can't be done, help me come up with the one way that it can. Let's collaboratively, let's work together and put our brains together and think of that one way that we can make it happen.
Excellent point.
Yeah, it's not going to look traditional. We're not playing full-fledged Wimbledon tennis games here in the classroom, but how can we teach that hand-eye coordination of racket sports in that setting?
Yeah, it's the whole thinking outside the box thing, and everybody is capable of doing it, and that's the beauty of our field, is that there's so many people willing to say, this worked for me. Did you consider doing it like this? Yeah. And then you love it, and hey, it's now what I'm going to do too. And you're right, absolutely.
I love it. I love this community.
So well done. We want to respect your time. We want to give you a big thank you. It was a great honor to have an opportunity to chat with you and really gain your insight.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate it. I said this in my emails. I really appreciate you thinking of having me. It's any way that I could try to help somebody, I'd be more than happy to do so.
Well, we sense that in your attitude and your humbleness, and we've not hardly scratched the surface as far as what you can give back to this community. All we got to do is find the right questions to ask. So really appreciate you being on here, and don't be surprised if we ask again when different topics come up, because you have a wealth of knowledge that the community needs to hear. And I love that you have the humility to accept that. It's awesome. We really appreciate you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys. It was very nice of you to say that. Thank you.
Well.
So Stacy, that was fantastic. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with Don as much as I did. It was just real awesome to get in the mind of somebody that was recognized as a Shape America Teacher of the Year, and just his journey to get there, and then to dive deeper into how he plans his lessons and how he thinks about PE.
Yeah, I love it. Fits right into the name of our podcast, Thinking PE. That's the beauty of it. He didn't just give us stuff. He gave us the behind the scenes, what's going on in his brain. That was so fun to pick his brain and let us know how he thinks about just the whole concept of PE and how he sets up his lessons and that kind of thing. I really did get a lot out of this, for sure.
You know, and going back to the 6 feet PE, you know, and when we threw this question at him, you know, we really didn't, this was early in the summer, we really didn't know where districts are going or states are going. And now that some of the districts, some of the states and districts have more laid out plans than others. So it is becoming more and more pertinent of what school might look like. But I think it doesn't, the concepts and the ideas that Don talked about, it doesn't really matter what setting we're going to be in.
No, it was interesting that it feels like not just with him, but whenever we're with a group of PE teachers, the more you dissect this idea of what it could look like, the more it comes back to the basics of fundamentals of good teaching.
Mm-hmm.
We're still going to be starting with a classroom of kids, most of us, that we don't know very well, or at least some kids in there that we don't know well, that don't know our procedures. So what do? First day, we usually start establishing your procedures. That's exactly what we're going to do, whether you're distance learning, whether you're in person, part-time, full-time, got kids every other day. It just really emphasizes more and more the importance of setting those procedures.
Mm-hmm.
And the procedures will just have a few added ones, like how to wash and, you know, hand sanitizers, how to stay 6 feet apart. But I like what you've said before in other podcasts. We're not alone. You want to expand on what you mean by that? We're not alone in this?
No, it's going to be a collaborative effort. And it's going to start with a collaborative effort in your very own school. I mean, when you start talking social distancing in schools, or kids wearing masks, or kids sanitizing before and after class, you'll be doing that as a school. You'll be establishing your just like if you're a PBS school or whatever you have going on, you're in it together.
Yeah.
So you'll have professional development, staff meetings, you know, talking with your colleagues, whether it's at lunch or during prep or before school. You'll be going through this journey together.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up each time, because I think it helps us all just relax a little bit and remember that, you're part of a staff. You're not in this alone. So,
you know, I was going to expand on a little, you know, beyond that, in that if you go to a social distancing during FIED, if you've had good classroom management in the past, those things are going to continue.
Yeah.
You're going to adjust. If you work well with kids, you're going to work well with kids no matter what the situation. And I give it, I mean, just look, if you get your gym taken away from you and you have to go into a classroom to teach, you know, an unexpected class, generally it goes fine for that one day because you've got great teaching 101.
Yeah. And I think that's important for us to remember or relax in. And some of our personalities handle that differently than others, but I think it's a good reminder for us. Before we get too far along here, you had told me a story, and this is kind of a bonus. It's not based on what Don said exactly, but I kind of wanted you to throw this in. You had told me a story about you've been out at, I believe it was a Lifetime Fitness with your kids, and you're talking about, hey, we haven't had a lot of experience of social distancing with young kids, but you were encouraged by a story or not a story, but what you saw. Can you fill them in on this?
Yeah, at our Lifetime Fitness, they have an outdoor pool with a couple water slides. And just like if you go to a water park, they have one person up on the top of the slide and one person, a lifeguard down at the bottom of the slide, controlling the flow of kids so you don't have kids build up in the tunnel. But going up the ladder, there's no adults. And at this Lifetime, they've been doing social distancing, you know, between the fitness centers, but then even outside as well. And what they have is on the steps, they have little stickers 6 feet apart. And what I found fascinating is that I'm sitting poolside watching my kids go up and down the slides. I was watching kids practice social distancing with zero adult intervention. And they were just following the little stickers on the thing, and they were helping each other. And it was really, really encouraging just to watch that. And then as you got towards the bottom of the slide, if there was a longer line, if there wasn't the visuals, then the kids were all bunched up. But once they got to those visuals, they automatically, they step on their stickers and move to the next one and just keep leapfrogging up the steps to the top of the water slide. And I say it was just encouraging that, okay, we're getting stressed out about hashtag 6 feet PE, and I'm watching these kids. They can do it.
Yeah, but you said the key thing for you. What you saw was the visuals. You saw when the visuals were there, the kids really did stick to that. And I'm thinking when I'm at Walmart or Menards or some other store, when those stickers are there, people generally stand on the stickers and they stay 6 feet apart. But when you're in an aisle and they're not, they don't. So I don't know how much, we're probably not that much different than the students.
Not at all.
I hate to say it, but yeah, we'll follow those visuals, but when they're not.
Truthfully, in many ways, we're harder as adults. We're harder to teach because we've got years and years of bad habits built up.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. But I'm glad you said that story, because I think that just highlights for us, a lot of people are starting to plan for their, whatever situation they're going back to. But don't forget that stickers and other visuals might be a key thing, especially for establishing, like we talked about, those procedures, and even hand washing. If you've got a hand washing station, how to stay a few feet apart and that type of thing. So it was a big thing for me when you said it, like going, yeah, I need to figure out how I'm going to lay out my gym and have visual reminders so the kids we can still play games, but still stay 6 feet apart and do the best we can if those are the rules we're asked to abide by. So pretty cool. I'm glad you noticed that.
So to wrap up this great conversation that we had with Don, if you have a growth mindset and you collaborate well with other teachers, you'll have a great PE program, and it doesn't matter what setting we're in. And maybe, just maybe, someday you too will be recognized as a Teacher of the Year.
And that is Thinking PE.
Connect with us on Facebook and Twitter at Thinking PE. Find us on all your favorite podcast providers by searching Thinking PE. For more resources and videos, go to www.thinkingpe.com. Thanks for listening.